All right, people. Yes, we are on a roll now. You thought that was good. Wait until you see what we have coming up next. We're excited about it, even more excited. What is it? Every round goes higher and higher, and that's exactly what is happening. There are many voices that are recognizable as soon as you hear them. Voices like our presiding elder, Ernest L. Montague, when he says, "I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continue." As soon as we hear his voice, like, that's presiding Elder Montague. Bishop Davis, with that raspiness in his voice, as soon as you hear, like, oh, that's Bishop. And for me, Bishop Frank Madison Reed III, that with that Southern drawl that he has, there are certain voices, and such is the case for our next speaker, the Reverend Charles Assembly. When I hear him singing, I automatically say, that's Uncle Charles. But he was born and reared in Annapolis, Maryland, and a product of the school systems of Anne Arundel County. Years later, he joined, he was converted at John Wesley United Methodist Church in Annapolis, and then joined Mount Olive AME Church right there in Annapolis, Maryland. He was licensed to preach in 1971 under the mentorship of his father in ministry, the late Reverend Dr. Edgar L. James. He received his Bachelor of Science degree in social work from Bowie State University. He was ordained as an itinerant deacon in 1978 and itinerant elder in 1980, both times, the deacon at Turner Memorial. That's when it was in DC, and Metropolitan in 1980. Both ordinations came at the hand of the late Bishop Henry Wendell Murph. In 1982, he received his first pastoral appointment at Mount Zion AME Church in Knoxville, Maryland. For those who know, Knoxville, Maryland is way down the road. And when you get to way down the road, you keep going. But that's where Knoxville, Maryland is. He served there faithfully for 2.5 years. In October of 1984, at the Second Episcopal District Mid-Year Conference, he was appointed pastor and currently serves as pastor of Union Bethel AME Church in Randallstown, Maryland. And he received that appointment from the late Bishop John Hurst Adams. At Union Bethel, God has been blessing the church under his leadership, and several ministries and outreach programs have been designed to enhance the spiritual, physical, and emotional needs of the community. His favorite scripture is Luke 12:48b, "For unto whom much is given, of him is much required, and to whom men have committed much, of him will they ask the more." And his favorite hymn is "It Is Well." And I'll tell you, for me, whatever song he gets up to sing is a favorite song that I love to hear him sing. In fact, Dr. Carter as well as Dr. Assembly both have been friends of our family and friends to this conference for a long time. And we thank God for him. And he's going to come and same thing, outside the box. So you all get ready, get your ink pen and get yourselves ready. As we welcome to the virtual platform, our next presenter is speaking on the role of a trustee, the Reverend Charles T. Assembly. Come on, let's receive him.
Thank you, Reverend Dana Porter, for your kind and generous words of presentation. To Presiding Elder Ernest L. Montague and First Lady Irene Montague, the officers and members of the Baltimore District of the Baltimore Annual Conference, the oldest conference in our Zion. I am certainly grateful to Almighty God to have been extended the invitation by your presiding elder, my friend across the years, to come and share with you at this district meeting. To my Bishop James Laverne Davis, his spouse, the Reverend Sister Aurelis Beavers Davis, I bring you greetings from Union Bethel AME Church. For nearly half a century, your pastor and I have been friends. It was during a lunch break at the annual conference that was hosted at Allen AME Church in Baltimore, where he and I and our late friend and brother Charles D. Smith took a lunch break. And because your elder is a native Baltimorean, he suggested that we would walk to the world famous Lexington Market. And we had lunch, and we have been friends ever since. To his lovely wife, for her ministry and support that she provides him and this district. Let's have a word of prayer. Eternal God, our Father, we thank you for the occasion which allows us to share with your people. I ask that the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Amen. To Dr. Carter, you are most kind, and I enjoyed, as always I do, in sitting at your feet, your presentation. It was certainly informative and inspiring. Your theme for today is taken from the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 9. It reads from the King James, "Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest." And reading in a more contemporary context, have I commanded you strength, courage. Don't be timid. Don't get discouraged. God, your God, is with you every step of the way. My assignment for today is to speak about the role of the trustees. I want to begin by emphasizing, and many times people cringe when I use this expression. As Dr. Carter has indicated, the house of God is a spiritual place. We are the body of Christ. But when we speak about the church, when we speak about the building, the property, and whose responsibility it is to be maintained by the trustees, we must operate the church as a business. You will find before you some excerpts taken from the 2016 Book of Discipline. I've noted some key areas in which I will share today and give commentary, and if time permits, at the end, I will entertain questions. In my presentation today, I want to basically share three particular areas. One, first and foremost, we're going to talk about trustees in the local church. And number two, we're going to talk about trustees, the annual conference. And finally, what I coined the phrase, to serve the present age, trustees in the year of COVID-19. The trustees are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the church and its property, all properties. In the tradition of our Zion, there was a period in the life of the church wherein the trustees physically were responsible for ensuring that all areas of upkeep and maintenance of the church was in fact done by the trustees. And that may very well be true in some areas. But in summation, it is a responsibility of the Board of Trustees of ensuring that those areas, the lights, etc., the cleaning of the church and all of its supplies, it is their responsibility of ensuring that those things are in fact done. The mode of election. Whenever the law of the land requires a specific mode of election, that mode shall be observed in electing trustees. And when the civil law does not intervene, the trustees shall be elected annually by the members of the church. And the minister in the church at a point in time will announce a church conference, which will be at least two consecutive Sundays, that an election will be held. The pastor will nominate twice the number of trustees that he or she feels is necessary, in fact, to facilitate their duties and responsibilities. No fewer than 3, no more than 19. And as stated, they have the responsibility of ensuring the maintenance and upkeep of all properties of the church. Next slide, please. Order of improvements. Whenever improvements are to be made, the pastor shall call together in the manner in which I described, a church conference, and the voting members of the church, with a majority vote being necessary for the improvements to be authorized. Now, let me expound upon that a bit. Should there be a matter that the trustees have ascertained requires improvement, the replacement of a roof or some other capital improvement, it is the responsibility of the local trustees to obtain a minimum of 3 proposals, a minimum of 3 proposals. Then the trustees in the local church among themselves will compare apple to apples, and upon the conclusion of that, will have made a recommendation as a board that they ultimately will take before the church conference. And let me share this. It's important because there are times in the setting of a board of trustees where in discussing matters of improvement that there may be differences of opinion. However, that's okay in the confines of the board of trustees. However, at that meeting, as stated, a minimum of 3 bids have been submitted. They take a vote among themselves that they determine is in the best interest of the church, having compared apples to apples and predicated on the majority of those who vote. That becomes the position of the board of trustees. Now, why am I sharing this? That setting has provided the opportunity for members of the board to discuss and debate among themselves. Therefore, when the board of trustees go before the membership, they are speaking as one voice. This is the recommendation of the board of trustees. Not that 10 voted this way and 7 voted this way. No, it becomes the position of the board of trustees. When the trustees make their presentation, the only commentary that should come from the trustees is speaking in support of what they are presenting. Okay, that's a local church. And again, as Dr. Carter said, you can refer to the Book of Discipline, pages 88 through 90, and it speaks more in detail regarding duties and the responsibilities of the trustees in the local church. Item number 5, the annual conference. And you again, I refer to you to pages 273 to 274 in the Book of Discipline. You see here the makeup, the composition of the board of trustees shall consist of no fewer than 3, no more than 19, and this is the requirement. And you will see that it is relegated to persons who have been members of the AME Church no fewer than 3 years and in good and regular standing. Now, I shared with you at the beginning that the church is a business, and it is paramount in conducting the affairs of the church, specifically as it pertains to property, that we facilitate the affairs of the church in a business manner. Item number 5 calls your attention to a document that was compiled by both of our servant bishop and also the Reverend Dr. Cassandra Sparrow. And what this document is, it is an 11-page document that any pastor on behalf of his or her church who desires to appear before the conference board of trustees must ensure that the 11 pages of this document are in fact addressed. That's important. Again, let me repeat that. Any pastor who desires on behalf of his or her congregation where they serve to come before the conference trustees regarding matters of property is first required to ensure that this 11-page document is in fact filled. Next slide, please. This guide, it's a part of the toolkit, and it is designed to aid the church to ensure that it is covering all bases in as far as it pertains to the process involved of getting capital improvements done. You see here on this slide the submission of information. All forms and support documents should be simultaneously mailed in two places. One, the second Episcopal District office. Number two, the Secretary of the Board of Trustees from their respective annual conference. And as noted, please submit packages at least 2 weeks prior to the scheduled conference trustee meeting date will be published on the SED website. A confirmation call and or email will be given upon the receipt of the document. Now, what this simply means is, after you have in fact filled and submitted this document to the office of the bishop, upon the review of the same, his office will in fact convey to the Secretary of the Conference Board of Trustees, which ultimately is made informed of the pastor and congregation requesting a session before the trustees. That's how that process is done. So again, beloved, this is extremely important. You have at the bottom of this slide the process involved in submission and the mailing address as to where it is in fact to be sent. Next slide, please. The role of the trustees. Now again, I'm referring to both the local church as well as it pertains to the annual conference. Now, if you meet the 2-week submission deadline, you will most likely be on the agenda for the next meeting of the conference trustees. As I said, you will receive a notice of confirmation of receipt, a package, as well as a note of date for your church submission on the agenda. And the Secretary of the Conference of the Trustees will notify the pastor and the respective presiding elder of the date for the submission to be on the agenda, and it will be specified whether it will be a meeting or a conference call. What has been the practice under our servant bishop, Bishop James LaBerge Davis? After the receipt of this document, the perusal, the reviewing of it, his office will then in fact notify the pastor that has requested a session before the conference trustees, who along with members of the trustee board will then at that time will give a summation of what it is that they are requesting authorization of the conference trustees to seek approval. There have been numerous times in the life of our church wherein the local church may not be in a fiscal state in terms of, for example, procuring financing for making capital improvements to the worship facility. In matters like that, again, the same criteria. You fill out the form, and when you come before the conference trustees, you make your presentation. Sometimes you are requesting that the trustees will serve as a matter of will serve as a matter of guaranteeing the loan that the local church wants to, in fact, receive. And so, beloved, as you can see, how important it is that when there are matters that require capital improvements regarding the physical plant of the congregation, that it is important that this document is filled, to put it in a kind of succinct kind of fashion. You want to ensure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. And what happens, this document, after it has been submitted to the office of the bishop, and he and his staff have reviewed it, and if it is proper, then that document, of course, and all the accompanying papers is provided the Secretary of the Board of Trustees of the conference, and as well as the request made by the local pastor on behalf of the local church that is provided members of the conference board of trustees. Next slide, please. Retention and storage of submission. And again, the rationale, the SED of the AME Church desires to have a greater system of accountability and transparency for our records. And the district is seeking to be in compliance with other legal and practical needs for retention and storage of submission of documents acted upon by conference trustees. I began my presentation by saying that we must facilitate the affairs of the church in a business manner. Item 1, at every annual conference, the trustees will report their work for the past year and any recommendations, and this will include at a minimum whatever affairs or whatever matters have come before the conference trustees for that conference year. The secretary of the conference trustees will read a report, will provide a summary report, which is contained in the minutes of the annual conference. And what this is merely doing, it is merely informing the it is informing the annual conference of the actions taken by the trustees for a particular conference year. The secretary of the conference is required to maintain files in a safe place for 5 years. Location identified, notification provided the conference trustee. This is the second level of retention and storage of the information. I might add that one of the offices in which I serve in the church, I serve as the secretary of the conference trustees of the conference for which I'm a part. And so the importance of storage and the retention of information is important. It should be stored in the SED, it should be stored in the local church, and of course, it is stored by the conference trustees of said conference. Next slide, please. The role of the trustees, and you can please see item D on this sheet. Now, it's important, as I said, I cannot emphasize it enough, of the importance of retaining records as it relates to the action taken by trustees, both in the local church and on an annual conference level. Next slide. All right, the following list contains items that should be provided a local church requesting action by conference trustees. A description, a narrative, cost of the proposed project, overall intended impact, supporting documentation for completing AME church approval process, local church financial readiness for the project, evidence of application for loans. Please include the actual application copies and accompanying letters, name of each financial institution, terms of the loan, i.e. interest rate, repayment period, etc., and clearly state on a sheet of paper the key information on the loan for each financial institution to which an application is submitted. Next slide, please. Of course, name of the institution. Is this a minority or African-American owned lender institution? One of the things in which our servant bishop has done, he has encouraged pastors, congregations in matters where they are applying or seeking financing for making improvements, that we do in fact give support to our own. So in other words, of course, in doing that, you want to ensure that you are appealing to an institution that is in the best interest of that local church. But what he is in fact encouraging, that in that process, we do encourage reaching out also to minority-owned financial institutions. So again, beloved, you can see how very intricate this process is, which goes back to my original statement of why it's important that when managing the affairs of the church, that we facilitate it in a business manner. I stated item number 2, does the church have a current or previous historical relationship with the financial institution. I recall in the early years of my current assignment, there was a point in time in which our congregation wanted to engage in some capital improvements. We followed the process as I have shared with you today. And then it came time for us, having received the authorization of the conference trustees to move forward, we went to the institution. And unfortunately, which has been the history of our nation, America's original sin is racism. Even though the congregation had a long-standing relationship with this financial institution, when we shared with them that we wanted them to be amenable, to be receptive in approving that which we were requesting of them, having gone through the process as mandated by the AME Church, their initial response, they turned us down. And I recall on that ensuing Sunday, I shared with the membership my disappointment that our history with this institution, they did not look upon favorable our requests. I was not discouraged, I was disappointed, but not discouraged. And so what I did on the following week, I went back to the institution and I said to the institution, as the lead representative of our local church, I want to remove all of our funding from this institution. Well, to give you the abridged version, they found it within themselves to go back and to reconsider our request, and ultimately they approved that which we were in fact requesting. I also want to inject something here that I think is important. I recall very, very vividly, using the same illustration, that when we met with the financial institution for which we had decided or recommended that we would utilize as a means of procuring the funds for the capital project, I was shocked and amazed that in that Q&A period with the representatives, among the questions that was asked of me as pastor in the company of my board members, when having submitted our financial documentation, was when they asked me what percentage of the church's income is tithes and offerings. And the reason being is because one of the things in which institutions, financial institutions do, they want to look at the pattern of your income. They want to ensure, they want to see that there is consistency in income coming into the congregation. There was a time in the lives of our churches wherein churches rely for its sustainability, particularly as it pertains to meeting the financial obligations of the church. They relied upon annual days. And so whenever Men's Day came, you would have a peak. And whenever Women's Day came, you had a peak. And then whenever a church or fall rally came, you would have a peak. But then the remaining period of the year, the conference year, it was like a seesaw, up and down. Institutions now, and considering applications made by faith organizations, want to be able to see consistent patterns of income coming into that local church, and that aids in their being looked upon favorably in terms of receiving the loan. Is there a penalty or repayment for early payoff? Are the conference trustees being requested to endorse the project or required to co-sign? Again, I reference that. Now, there are some instances wherein procedurally, because beloved, it is a procedure. It is not optional. Like if the local church, under the supervision of its pastor, with the support of the board of trustees and the authorization of the membership through a church conference, to come before the board of trustees. Not every local church that comes before the trustees is asking the trustees to co-sign, but merely to inform by virtue of the process that this is the intent, this is the desire of the local church as it pertains to making capital improvements. Are there any special issues, congregational overview, and other supporting documents, which again is optional? Next slide, please. Summary of attachments. Quick overview of submissions. Background on the financial institution. Overview of the conference trustees. Local church checklist. Local church financial institutions background. Next slide. All of this must be completed in the manner as described and then forwarded as per instructed to the office of Bishop James Davis, who is the chair of the board. Then and only then will the pastor of the church making the request come before the trustees for the consideration of what they have asked. Item number 7. This is the third and final part of my presentation, and then if time permits, I will attempt to entertain any questions you might have. And I issue a disclaimer. This is not contained in the book of discipline. It's what I call a trustee in the year of COVID-19. In addition to complying with the above, this pandemic, beloved, as many of you have shared throughout your coming together today, has necessitated that we be creative, that we embrace the utilization of virtual technology. It's not an option. Virtual technology will forever be a part of how we facilitate not only business, but worship in our Zion. Our worship services, Bible studies, meetings, and other areas of ministry are being done through the various platforms of virtual technology. A majority of our congregations, as shared earlier in your gathering here today, have not returned to the sanctuary. Next slide. Now, this is a model. This is for consideration. In the election of trustees, here is an example that you might consider, because you may be saying, well, Reverend, how do we facilitate in complying with the directive of the discipline in facilitating an election of trustees annually, and we're unable to go into our corporate setting? I'm glad you asked. Now, here are some procedures that you might consider. So develop a ballot, again, twice the number that the pastor determines he or she feels are sufficient in facilitating the duties and responsibilities of the office of a trustee for the local church. Their names, along with a photograph next to their names. And through the use of technology, at a convening of a church conference, same process, they will in fact be instructed to vote for a minimum of 50% of the total persons nominated. Now, in instances when there are individuals who do not have access to a computer on the eve of the scheduled election, you can arrange having the same ballot, photograph and the name beside the photograph, and through a drive-through, those individuals who do not have access to a computer would be provided a ballot wherein they will make their selections and their ballots placed in a ballot box. Beloved, that's kind of a summary, a caption of my presentation. And if time permits, I will entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Reverend Simbly. Let me do a couple of things before we go to questions. One is that I have his bio, but I didn't turn it over. I didn't turn the page. So there is more to it that I need to share with you to make sure I don't get in trouble.
Okay.
One is that Reverend Sibley serves as co-historiographer as the Second Episcopal District and the recording secretary of the Conference Board of Trustees, and he's a member of the Board of Examiners in the Washington Conference. And let me tell you why I had to say something, because he's married to Sister Pamela Sibley, and they've been married for 48 years. I'm telling you, I think I need to see IDs or something, for 48 years, and have 3 children, and they make sure to put 3 loving adult children. And I understand that. Anybody got some adult children, just go ahead and celebrate God right where you are. And 8 wonderful grandchildren. Amen. We thank God for them. And as Reverend Sibley was talking, but I think the first thing that caught our attention, and you're absolutely right, Reverend Sibley, we don't want to hear that the church is a business. We always wanted to be super spiritual and holy and where we meet God, but church is the function of there's a, my husband and I call it going behind the veil. That's when you have to really deal with the business part of the church. So thank you for that. And then if you would, because I also love the when you talk about process and accountability, because I think so many churches were being left in bad places. So, and there was no paperwork, nothing following up. But if you would just clarify or explain when conference trustees should be informed or contacted regarding changes to the buildings, meaning if we need to buy a new door, is it necessary to contact the conference board trustees? When is it appropriate to contact the conference trustees?
Again, and thank you, Pastor Porter. No, again, and in no time am I suggesting that every kind of improvement associated with the building, the properties of the church, that the local trustees should contact conference trustee. No, not saying that. To distinguish between the two, matters of capital improvements. And there is, I don't want to misspeak, there is no dollar figure within the context of the discipline that defines when a local church shall in fact notify trust. Let me give you an example. And again, as Dr. Carter said, what I'm about to say is not contained in the book of discipline. Here's an illustration I've used whenever teaching a workshop on trustees. There are instances in some local church wherein the local church, the board of trustees, may in fact make a request of the official board that they be authorized to disperse a certain dollar amount without having to come before the church conference. And this is an illustration that I use. If in fact trustees arrive at the church and they determine that the furnace is not working. It's an old furnace. You've had it 30, 40 years. It's not working. Now, there is no debate as to whether or not you're gonna get a furnace.
Right.
You got to get a furnace. So again, to answer your question, Reverend Porter, that there are some congregations wherein the trustees will in fact make a request to the official board that they are authorized to, in the facilitating of their duties, to spend a certain dollar amount, not to exceed XYZ, without having to come before the church conference to gain approval to do that. And again, so again, you won't. That's not in the discipline. But right. Again, it's designed for process, because you don't want the board of trustees having to have to come before the local membership to get authorization to right. do everything that you arrive at the church and the door is off. You got to replace the door. Yeah. Like that. So I hope that kind of answers. Yeah. I hope that helps.
And what about when they with the conference trustees? Yes, when is it appropriate to reach out to the conference, the I'm sorry, not the conference. Yeah, the conference trustees. to request? Is it when like a loan is being taken out? Is that when we reach out to the conference trustees?
At the beginning of the process, in the manner as which I shared, that 11-page document, if in fact the local church wants to borrow money for capital improvements from the outset, they have to fill out that form.
Okay.
In the manner I described, and upon completing that, submitting it to the office of the chair, and the office of the chair and the appropriate parties will review that document, and per having dotted all I's and crossed all T's, then that local pastor is notified either by the chair and or the secretary of the conference trustees of the convening of a meeting with that pastor and members of the trustee. And at that point in time, the pastor, with the support of his or her trustees, will give a summation of what it is that they are requesting of the trustees. I might inject, as I said in my presentation, that document, having gone through their process, will have already then been provided members of the conference trustees. Because that will provide us having an opportunity and also reviewing, which minimize many times a lot of questions when we convene with the pastor and members of their local trustees.
Okay, and we have a question from Reverend Will Kinlaw. How do you recommend trustees vet the contractors who submit proposals for physical improvements to church properties?
Well, of course, you always want to ensure, that contractors for which you are, in fact, considering are licensed. Again, let me say this in this context. As I said earlier, there was a time in the life of the congregation where matters associated with improvement and maintenance of property, that the trustees themselves did it. And it might still be true. And we praise God for those persons. And there might be some instances where that's still true. But you want to, again, it's not the same if for example, hypothetically, if I want to have a kind of improvement in my own personal home.
Right.
Well, if things fall through the crack, I'm answerable. I have nobody to blame but myself. But when you are representing a congregation, you can't make those kinds of decisions. So you want to ensure that any contractor for whom you are obtaining a proposal, a type detailed proposal, you want to ensure that that contractor is in fact licensed and insured. I mean, I know, and again, I'm not hating on anybody. You know, sometimes you'll have a member of the church who will say, "Oh, I know so and so, and they have, you know, and that has its place." But if they're not insured, and the work is shabby, then that falls on the church. You have no recourse. But if they are insured, you have a recourse.
Reverend, simply tell the truth, it falls on the pastor, because you know, if they get that person, even though if it's somebody's cousin,
yes, ma'am,
and it falls apart, then everybody's going to blame the pastor for letting so-and-so's cousin do the work.
That's
so
correct.
So thank you for that. Reverend Cornelius Hubbard, can the Stewardship and Finance Can the Stewardship and Finance Commission be discussed as it relates to trustees and steward responsibilities, respectively?
I'm not sure. Let me say this. I'm not sure if I understand the question. We know that the composition of the Commission on Stewardship and Finance is an equal number of stewards and trustees and one member of large, no more than 9 people. And so 4 stewards and 4 trustees. Now, the role of the Stewardship and Finance Commission does not fall within the purview of duties and responsibilities of the trustees. What the Stewardship and Finance is charged with is dispersing the funds of the church per approval of the official board. So Stewardship and Finance has no role in terms of what I have been describing as it relates to the duties of trustees. Only that 50% of the composition of the commission are stewards and trustees and a member of large. An equal number of stewards, equal number of trustees.
All righty. Thank you for that. Reverend Will Kinlaw says, licensed, bonded, insured, and also to use the Better Business Bureau website for
As a
record of
reference.
complaints.
Unquestionable. That's important. Unquestionable.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm jotting down my notes at the same time. I know, let me say this one more time, because all of this information will be made available. The slides, as well as the recording from today, will be made available to all who are interested at the appropriate time. Are there any more questions? We still have some time. Are there any more questions? Okay, it looks like everybody is good. Great information, excellent, most pertinent information. Thank you so very much, Reverend Simbly. Everybody is, so far, everything on the chat right now is just saying thank you. Excellent presentation. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. If there are no other questions, come on, let's celebrate and give thanks for the Reverend Charles Simbly and for this information that he shared with us on today. We thank God for him, and we thank God. Yes, great information, great information. And I believe that we all have learned quite a bit, if nothing else, to know that there is a process that we now have that's been put in by our servant leader, Bishop Davis, so that we can, accountability is always in place. I think that is it. So thank you again, Reverend Simbly. Reverend Monique, next.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here. God bless.
Hold on. Wait a minute. Question. In the age of COVID, whose responsibility is the new form of donation management? I don't know what that. I don't know who that would be for. I don't know. I don't know who. Reverend Simbly, is Reverend Simbly and Reverend Carter? Are you all still? Is Reverend Carter still on?
Yeah, we're still here. I don't understand the donation. What did it mean when it's a donation? What are they referring to?
Online donations. In the age of COVID, whose responsibility, I guess, is it for managing online donations? I think that's what he means. So I guess he's asking, like, is it who's responsible for those numbers, for keeping track of that?
The stewards of the trustees.
Would that still be stewards, or just what?
That would be the stewards, the stewards, the trustees, as far as those items that go toward the building would be trustees. So I guess the best way to answer that would be, as Reverend Simbly said, that would be the Stewardship and Finance Commission.
And thank you, Dr. Carter. And to add to that, there are many apps, there are many cash apps that our congregants, our supporters are utilizing as it relates to donating electronically. And many of those apps will have their own criteria as it relates to the process involved in submitting their contributions, and also as well as identifying to the local church who the contributors are. So every app, every cash app, every platform that you use has its own system of requirements. All the Commission on Stewardship and Finance, they receive from these various companies the amounts that they in fact have received. And my understanding, I know in talking to members of my commission, that because it's done electronically, the members of the local church merely get a notification that this amount has in fact been submitted by Jane Doe, John Doe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cornelius, I hope that answered your question. But okay, let's see. Sister Rhonda, our church stewards are the ones who keep track and submit monthly reports to our pastor. I think that was just a statement. I think she was just making a statement.
Okay.
Any other questions before we move forward? Going once, type fast.
Reverend Ashton.
Yes.
Just one thing, Elder Monique, just want to take a moment of personal privilege. And I can say this for both myself and the Reverend Simbly. I think it's very appropriate that Reverend Ashton was the one that introduced the two of us today, because the two of us were ordained by your father 40-some years ago. He was on the
Wow.
board of examiners, and I was ordained both in 77 and 78, deacon and elder, and Reverend Simley was, I think, a year behind me. So we have their lineage. So we thank your father for being that. And so you're today the one that represents him as the one that presents us.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Permit me also, thank you for sharing that, my brother. Again, the late Reverend William Robert Porter, your dad, I remember very, very vividly. I can't remember if it was the year of my ordination for diaconate or elders, but every person entering the Board of Examiners or who has gone through the process know that there are 3 books you are always supposed to have with you. The Bible, the hymn book, and the discipline. And I remember very, very vividly standing before the late Bishop Henry Wendell Murphy, and I had inadvertently left my discipline on my pew. And all of a sudden, as I held the Bible and the hymn book under my right arm, all of a sudden I felt this movement, and it was your late father who was sliding my discipline.
Wow. Wow.
Under my arm. So yeah, I echo what Dr. Carter has said. We are grateful for you, and again for the leadership of your presiding elder and his spouse, and the wonderful work that you all are doing in the conference for kingdom building. Thank you again, Elder Monique, for the invitation. I pray that something that I've shared will be helpful, beneficial to those who were listening.
Well, you all aren't done yet, because we still got questions coming in. But thank you for all of that. And to my students that are on in the Board of Examiners, now you all know where I get it from. Because I would be the one, honestly, to stick a book up under their arm just to make sure everybody is in place. One last question. Is it reasonable for conferences to be on the same church management and accounting systems moving forward?
Well, I'll take a stab and then Reverend Carter can comment. Every local church has to discern what accounting system works most effective for them, or what might work in one local setting might not work in another local setting. That's where it's important that the pastor has a discerning spirit. You will note within our Zion, we are given an option as it pertains to the fiscal management of the church to determine whether or not we're going to have a commission or we're going to have a committee. And so we're given an option. But again, every local church is different. Under the supervision, leadership of the pastor, it has to ascertain which method, which system of accounting works best for that local church. There's no one size fit all. I like that. I hope that, and Dr. Carter may want to give some commentary to that.
Yeah, no, I agree with Reverend Simley.
All right, folks, last time.